welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim as we continue our journey with Little Faith and Christian. Today we continue with Chapter 13, Part 4, Hopeful Misjudges Little Faith. "It's wonderful," said Hopeful, "that he didn't out of necessity end up selling or pawning some of his jewels to help relieve his misery." "You're talking like one who isn't seeing clearly," Christian responded. "For what price should he have pawned them? Or to whom should he have sold them? His jewels were not highly valued anywhere in the country where he was robbed. Also, he didn't want the relief that such a transaction would bring. Had his jewels been missing at the gate of the celestial city, he knew that he would have been excluded from an inheritance there. That would have been worse for him than the confrontation of 10,000 thieves." "Why do you speak so sharply, brother?" asked Hopeful. "Esau sold his birthright for a serving of stew, and that birthright was his greatest jewel. If he did it, why not Little Faith also?" "Esau did indeed sell his birthright, as do many others," said Christian. "But like that wicked man, they exclude themselves from the chief blessing. However, you must recognize the difference between Esau and Little Faith and their situations. Esau's birthright was earthly, whereas Little Faith's jewels were not. Esau's belly was his God, but Little Faith's belly was not. So Esau's desire lay in his fleshly cravings, Little Faith's did not. Besides, Esau could see no further than fulfilling his lusts. He said, quote, 'When a man is dying of starvation, what good is his birthright?' Unquote. But Little Faith, though he had only a small amount of faith, by that small amount was not only kept from such an indulgence, but was able to see and prize his jewels more than selling them, like Esau his birthright. You cannot read anywhere that Esau had so much as a little bit of faith. So where the flesh alone holds sway, as it will in the person who has no faith to resist with, it is no wonder if he sells his birthright, and his very soul to the devil of hell. He is like a jackass that, because of its nature, cannot be turned away. When his mind is set upon lust, he will go for it, whatever the cost. But Little Faith was different from that. His mind was on the things of God, and his means of support came from what was spiritual and above. Therefore, there would have been no reason for him to sell his jewels simply to fill his mind with worthless things. Will a man pay $1 to fill his stomach with hay? Or can you persuade the turtle-dove to live on dead fish like the crow? For carnal lusts, faithless ones might be driven to pawn, mortgage, or sell what they have, along with their very lives to boot. But those who have faith, saving faith, though only a little of it, cannot do so. So here, my brother, is your mistake." "I admit it," said Hopeful, "but your strong reaction almost made me angry." "Why would you get angry? I only said you were acting like a man who wasn't seeing clearly. But please forgive me, and let's forget about this and return to the subject we have been discussing." Chapter 13, Part 5, Hopeful's Idealism. "But Christian, I am persuaded in my heart that those 3 thieves were nothing but cowards. Why else would they run at the sound of someone else coming up the road? Why didn't Little Faith muster up great courage? I think he should have at least tried to fight them, and if he couldn't win, then yield." "Many have said that these 3 are cowards," answered Christian, "but few have found it to be the case in their own time of trial. As for Greatheart, Little Faith had none. And my brother, I think that if you had been that man, you perhaps would have had a short skirmish, but then yielded. In addition, it is one thing to think we have courage when things are easy, but quite another to have it when we are suddenly afflicted. You might have second thoughts if you were suddenly in that man's shoes. And consider also that these are hired thieves. They serve under the king of the bottomless pit, who, if need be, will himself come to their aid, with a voice like that of a roaring lion. I myself have been confronted as Little Faith was, and I have found it to be a terrible thing. These 3 villains set upon me once, and when I began to resist like a Christian, they called their master, and he immediately came. As the saying goes, I would have given my life for a penny, but thank God, in accordance with his will, I was clothed with the armor of assurance. Yet even though I was so equipped, I still found it difficult to stand firm. No one knows what it is like to go through such combat except the one who is in the battle himself. But they ran, you see, said Hopeful. They fled as soon as they thought the one called the Great Grace was coming. That is true, both they and their master have often fled when Great Grace has appeared, and no wonder, since he is the king's champion. But I trust you will allow for some difference between Little Faith and the king's champion. Not all the king's subjects are champions, nor are they able, when tried, to do such feats as Great Grace. Is it fitting to think that a toddler should handle Goliath as David did? Or a wren should have the strength of an ox? Some are strong, some are weak. Some have great faith, some have little. This man was one of the weak, and so he went to pieces. I wish Great Grace had appeared to them, said Hopeful. If he had, he might have had his hands full, said Christian, for I have to tell you that even though Great Grace is very highly skilled at using his weapons, and has been able to do well against them as long as he can keep them at the tip of his sword, his victory is never assured. For if faint heart, mistrust, or guilt can get by his sword, they can throw him down. And once a man is down, what can he do? If you look closely at Great Grace's face, you can see numerous scars that prove what I say. Yes, once I heard that he said in combat, quote, "We despair even in life," unquote. And how these same criminals and their friends made David groan and mourn. Yes, and Heman and Hezekiah, who were champions of the faith in their day, were forced to rally when they were assaulted by them as well. In spite of their stand, they were not without bruises. Once Peter thought he would see what he could do. But even though some say he is the prince of the apostles, when they were through with him, he was afraid of his own shadow. Besides, their helper comes at their whistle. He is never out of hearing range, and whenever they are hard pressed, he comes to help them, immediately if possible. Of him it is said, when he rises up, the mighty are terrified. They retreat before his thrashing. The sword that reaches him has no effect, nor does the spear, or the arrow, or the javelin. Iron he treats like straw, and bronze like rotten wood. Arrows do not make him flee. Sling stones are like chaff to him. A club seems to him like a piece of straw. He laughs at the rattling of the lance. What can one do in a case like this? It is true, if a man could have Job's horse, along with the skill and courage to ride him, he could do notable things. For he paws fiercely, rejoicing in his strength, and charges into the fray. He laughs at fear, afraid of nothing. He does not shy away from the sword. The quiver rattles against his side, along with a flashing spear and lance. In frenzied excitement he eats up the ground. He cannot stand still when the trumpet sounds. At the blast of the trumpet he snorts. Aha! He catches the scent of battle from afar, the shout of the commanders, and the battle cry. But for those of us who walk on the ground, let us never desire to meet an enemy, nor boast as if we could do better than another when we hear of their failings. Let us not flatter ourselves with thoughts of our own boldness, prowess, or power, for those who do this are often the ones who fall hardest under trial. Take Peter, for example, who I mentioned before. His foolish mind convinced him that he would do better and stand more faithfully for his master than all the others. In spite of his worthless boasting, he was soundly defeated by these villains. When we hear of such robberies taking place on the king's highway, I believe there are 2 things we should do. First, we must go out fully equipped, and this includes taking a shield with us. Without a shield, how can we hope to stand against one such as Leviathan? If we have no shield, he thinks nothing of us. Therefore, as one highly skilled in warfare has said, quote, "In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one." Unquote. Second, I believe that it is good also to desire a convoy of the king's forces to accompany us for our protection. Indeed, we should petition the king himself to go with us. This caused David to rejoice in the valley of the shadow of death, and Moses would rather have died than to have gone one step without his God. Oh, my brother, if he will go with me, I will not fear the tens of thousands drawn up against me on every side. But without him, even the proudest warriors will fall into the ranks of the slain. As for me, I already have some experience in this warfare, and through the abundant grace of him who is greatest, I am still very much alive, as you can see. But I cannot boast of any strength on my part. As a matter of fact, I would be very greatly relieved if I never had to experience any such attacks again. I fear, however, that we have not yet gone beyond all danger. But as the lion and the bear have not yet devoured me, I trust that God will also deliver us from the next uncircumcised Philistines, those enemies of God that seek our destruction." Then Christian sang, "Poor little Faith, have you been among thieves? Were you robbed? Remember, if you believe, you'll get more faith than a victor you'll be, over 10,000, and not a mere 3. And that ends our reading for today. Next week we'll pick up with chapter 14, part 1. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless.